Hey, what's going on everyone? I'm Sam Lazarus, Creative Director for Rokoko, and today I'm super excited to do a thorough unboxing, full walkthrough and setup of the new Rokoko Coil Pro. The Coil Pro is our new EMF-based motion capture hardware device, and it allows you to get absolute position for your Rokoko smart gloves. If you have any more questions after watching this video, I encourage you to go check out our Getting Started and FAQ guides, which we have linked down in the description below. Okay, let's get after it. Your shipping box should be clearly labeled to show which side is up, and here we've cut through the top of the box, but you actually don't need to go through the top of the box. Instead, locate the tearaway tabs at the side of the box, rip them off, and then you can pull the entire top half of the box off. After that, you should be able to easily pull out the interior box that houses the coil itself. To open this box, we're proud of this fun little process where we remove the top of the coil box, and then the sides of the box should just fall away, exposing the coil itself. We created the box this way because we didn't want customers trying to tip the box and slide the coil out. The coil is a little bit heavier than some of our other hardware devices, so you should always use caution when handling, picking up, or moving the Coil Pro. One important thing about the box itself, we recommend keeping this on hand. The box and the internal molding that the coil sits in is a great way to pack up your coil in case you're heading off to a set on site or you're traveling with your coil. So once you've opened up that internal coil box, you can remove the coil. Again, always use caution when handling it. Underneath the coil, you'll see this quick start guide that has some basic instructions for getting started. Then under the guide, you have a USB-C to A cable, and importantly, the power brick for the coil and adapters for any country that you may be in. To add the appropriate adapter for your country, simply slide it onto the brick, and then to remove the adapter, which you'll need to do to put the adapter back into the packing mold, just press down on that little button on the adapter and slide it out of the brick. Okay, so one super important thing to note about this power adapter. Although the connector for your coil is a USB-C connector, this adapter supplies amperage above and beyond what a normal device will be able to handle. So there's a very good chance that if you use this adapter to power, say, an iPad, you may permanently damage the device. So only use this adapter to power the coil. Also to note, only this adapter will be able to supply enough power to your coil for it to work as intended. So if you use just a normal USB-C cable plugged into the wall to power your coil, you won't be able to generate an EMF field, and the coil is not going to work to create motion capture. So two very important points. If we flip the coil upside down, you can see that we have a standard tripod mount directly in the center of the underside of the coil. And this is also our USB-C port where we will power on our coil. So now let's go ahead and actually get our coil ready to use. The first thing we'll do is make sure we have the correct firmware for our coil, our smart gloves, and our Smart Suit Pro 2. A firmware update will be required to use the coil, and it's always a good idea to keep your hardware devices up to date. To upgrade the firmware for the coil, first I'll open up Rokoko Studio. I'm going to connect my coil to my computer using a USB-C to A cable. And as soon as I plug the coil into my computer, I'll see a little pop-up asking if we need to update the firmware on the coil. You will need to do this the first time you use your coil. The coil will power on enough to update the firmware. But again, you need to use the coil power adapter when you're actually ready to record motion capture. Under the firmware tab, we can check to see if there's new firmware. If there is, click to install it, and do not unplug the coil while the process completes. Once you've updated your coil's firmware, let's plug in our smart gloves to make sure they also have the most recent firmware. If they need a firmware update, follow the same process as you did for the coil to update. Also, if you're going to be using the smart gloves without a Smart Suit Pro 2, this is a good time to make sure that your smart gloves Wi-Fi is configured. To do that, you can just go to the Wi-Fi tab, click the little magnifying glass to find your Wi-Fi network, enter in all the details, and hit connect. Finally, go ahead and do this same process with your Smart Suit Pro 2. I find that I like to have my Smart Suit Pro 2 powered on when I update the firmware, so I'll plug in a battery and then I'll plug it into my computer. Make sure that I'm on the latest firmware, and then also make sure that my Wi-Fi details are correct. If you're looking for more info about this process, you can always check out our onboarding tutorials, which cover this all in depth. Okay, so once we've made sure that we're on the latest firmware, we're ready to actually use our coil. And to that end, let's talk briefly about how to set up your coil in your capture space. So first of all, we don't recommend that you set up your coil either on the floor or next to a wall. One reason for this is that the coil emits that electromagnetic field, which is essentially a bubble. And that means that if you set up the coil either on the ground or next to a wall, you're limiting the potential usable space in that bubble that's generated by the coil. Another important reason to set up the coil this way is that it's possible your coil's signal strength may be negatively affected by any metals, especially ferrous or iron metals, that are either in your walls or in your floor. Therefore, we recommend that you mount the coil on a tripod at least 1 meter off of the ground, and you want to ensure that your coil is mounted levelly. If your coil is mounted at an angle, it's possible your motion capture may also be skewed relative to how your coil is mounted. So make sure your coil is on that tripod and at the bottom of the coil is parallel to the floor. I don't need a level to do this, but I can just eyeball and make sure that my coil is level. If you choose to, in maybe a studio or a dedicated capture space, you can also mount your coil upside down from the ceiling. But again, we recommend that there's at least 1 meter of space between your coil and the ceiling. If you are mounting from the ceiling, you'll also want to make sure to check the ceiling mounted option in Rokoko Studio when you set up your coil in your scene. So now that we have our coil mounted, let's hop into Rokoko Studio and create a new scene. Once we're in our scene, I'll go ahead and plug in my coil using the supplied power adapter. You may notice that nothing happens in our scene, and that's okay. The coil will only appear in your scene once a pair of smart gloves have been detected via Wi-Fi. So you have to either power on your smart gloves if you're using them standalone, or you have to power the Smart Suit Pro 2 that your smart gloves are connected to before the coil will actually populate and show up in your scene. The first time a coil is detected by Rokoko Studio, you'll get this pop-up that has a bunch of different intro videos and instructions and links to some of our getting started and FAQ guides. To start with, I'll be using my smart gloves connected to a smart suit. So as soon as I power on my smart suit and my gloves are detected over Wi-Fi, our coil will pop up in our scene. At this point, we're going to add our smart suit to our actor profile. You can check out the guide that's linked in the description below for instructions on setting up your actor profile. In addition to adding your height measurement, we also recommend adding your arm span and your hand width and hand length in the detailed measurements panel. So your arm span is going to be from each tip of your middle finger when you put your arms out level to the ground, tip to tip. Hand width is going to be the measurement of the widest part of your palm, and hand length is going to be from the base of your palm to the tip of your middle finger. I do find that at least adding your arm span to the height measurement that should already be in there, your motion capture data is going to be a lot more accurate when you're using the Coil Pro. Once I've finished with my actor profile and I've added it to my scene, I will drag my Smart Suit Pro onto my profile, and my smart gloves will automatically be added to the actor profile as well. So now we can do our standard calibration pose. I'll select my actor profile and then I'll click calibrate. You can face any direction when doing your calibration, and this will not only calibrate your mocap avatar, but will also automatically calibrate the height of your coil in your scene. One important thing to note is that if you're using your coil with multiple actors, you need to manually set the height of your coil. And this can be something that's good to do even if you're just using the coil as a single person, especially if you're seeing weird things in your motion capture. To manually add the height of the coil, we will click on the checkbox, and then we will add the distance from the bottom of the coil to the ground. So once we're calibrated, we're ready to record. And as you can see, we have absolute position for our smart gloves, which means we can do things like clap, we can more accurately handle props, or interact correctly with multiple actors. The radius of the EMF bubble from the coil is approximately 4 meters. And so you'll get accurate absolute position for your smart gloves within those 4 meters. If you exit those 4 meters and out of the coil bubble, the SmartSuit Pro 2's inertial systems will kick in and you'll lose the coil's absolute position for your smart gloves. However, once you re-enter the bubble, you will pick up that absolute position again. It's also worth noting that there is an interior radius around the coil in which the smart gloves will not work. And you can see if I reach out and touch the coil, our field will turn red, which means we'll lose absolute position for our gloves. So make sure to stay outside of this interior radius to maintain that absolute position for your smart gloves. Let's also talk briefly about how to get the best performance from your coil. If you click the Details tab, you can get some more detailed information about the performance of your smart gloves and your coil. So ideally, you always want to keep your smart glove indicators green. If you are dipping lower than green into yellow or red, you may want to try to reposition your coil in the room or try to remove any ferrous or iron metals or electronics from within the coil capture space. When using the coil, you also want to ensure that your smart gloves are pulled down properly over your forearm. And this is to prevent oversaturation on that forearm sensor. So make sure that the smart gloves are properly secured on your arms. Okay, so let's record a quick scene. We can do some clapping. And then we'll grab our sword prop and give a few swings. As you can see, our hands are actually positioned correctly now when we're using that two-handed prop, something that was impossible when using our normal inertial-based SmartSuit Pro 2 system. The coil also fundamentally eliminates global actor drift, and this is because Studio knows where your gloves are in absolute space, and therefore we also know where the actor should be. After we're done recording, the rest of the process is really the same as it's always been. We make sure to go through and correct any foot contact keyframes as needed. You can check out our onboarding tutorial series for a detailed look at how to record motion capture in Rokoko Studio generally. And I highly recommend checking out those tutorials because there's lots of good tips and tricks in there, which will also apply to using your coil. One new thing in this version of Rokoko Studio are some of the visibility settings. If I click on my actor profile, I can choose to only show the hands or only the face, or my entire actor. It's also important to note that you won't be able to use elevation tracking for now when using the Coil Pro. This is something we're working on for the future, but for now, if you want to use elevation tracking features, you'll have to create a new scene in which you have not used the coil and do your elevation tracking mocap in there. Another thing to mention is that if we want to turn off our coil, we can press the button on top of the coil to stop generating the EMF bubble. This means that we'll jump back to using the standard inertial motion capture system that is already in the Rokoko SmartSuit Pro 2. And this can be an effective way to jump between using the coil and using the original system. So now let's do a quick scene using just our smart gloves and the Coil Pro. So I've taken off my smart suit and I've got my smart gloves plugged directly into a power bank that's sitting in my back pocket. As soon as I power on my gloves, assuming I've already set them up individually with the correct Wi-Fi network, my coil will be detected in my scene and I can use my gloves standalone. So this is an entirely new feature, as we were never able to get absolute position of the gloves without a SmartSuit Pro before the coil. When we click the calibrate button, we'll get a slightly different prompt for our calibration, where we'll hold our hands out at a 90-degree angle so that our forearms are parallel to the ground. And again, these gloves have absolute position in space, which means we can move around and they'll know exactly where they are. So you can record a clip as normal and then use the visibility settings to make sure that only the gloves are shown. We see a lot of potential with standalone gloves plus coil for things like VTubing or live streaming, and you can check out some of our new tutorials on this topic for more info. So jumping back into our original suit and gloves recording, we can do all the other things that we can normally do in Rokoko Studio. We could add a Mixamo or Unreal character if we wanted to do some retargeting within Rokoko Studio. We could then make some pose adjustments to that character. You can use this drop down to adjust the arms or the shoulders and the neck. And then if we want to do an export, we can just right click on our clip and export it out as we normally would. You'll also notice that we've now added the ability to export with the UE5 mannequin skeleton, which is super exciting on its own. After we export, we can then pull our motion capture into Unreal Engine or any other 3D software that we want. And again, you can check out our prior tutorials for more information on how to do retargeting in all the different 3D softwares. And that's how you get your new Coil Pro up and running and recording motion capture. So this is a completely new type of motion capture technology. And while we're super excited to release it into the wild, we also know that as the coil is used in new and varied environments that we maybe couldn't test for, some new issues may pop up. You can check out the links down in the description below for a list of all known issues that we've seen with the coil. But if you run into anything especially wonky, reach out to us at support@rokoko.com. We will help you figure it out. And it's good for us to know about any of those new issues so we can push new software updates or new firmware updates to fix them. We hope you found this video helpful, and we cannot wait to see what everyone creates using their new Rokoko Coil Pros. And stay tuned to this channel for lots more Coil Pro content and tutorials coming soon. Thanks everyone. Bye bye.